What is up, guys? Frosty0232 here today for another Frosty Features. So if you've never been here for Frosty Features, what this is a comic book background on the toons that you use in Marvel Strike Force, and I am Frosty Osty, your humble host with the most. Alright, today we are talking about one of our upcoming members for the Nowhere team. That member being the one and only Cosmo the Space Dog. So, without further ado, let's do it. According to Scopely, Cosmo, a golden retriever, Labrador mixed dog, Cosmo was launched into Earth's orbit as a part of a space program experiment. Her spacecraft eventually drifted out of orbit, exposing Cosmo to cosmic rays that mutated her and gave her psionic powers. She served as a chief of security for Nowhere before joining forces with Nowhere hero mainstays like Nova and the Guardians to protect the galaxy from intergalactic threats. We'll talk about Scopely's description. That's just what they gave in the blog post. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But here's mine. Cosmo the Space Dog, in one of the coolest drawings of Cosmo there is. Name: Cosmo. Cosmo the Space Dog. It is what it is. That's all there is. First appearances in Nova Volume 4, number 8 in 2007. So Cosmo is a relatively recent character. So Cosmo hasn't been in a whole bunch of stuff. We aren't going to cover everything Cosmo has done. We've done a couple of Frosty Features where we have actually covered the entire comic book background of a character. We're almost going to hit all of Cosmo's, but not quite. Powers/abilities: telekinesis and telepathy. Telekinesis being the power to be able to lift things up and throw them around. Telepathy being able to read minds and communicate via people's minds. And important, we're going to talk a lot of this feature is going to be the differences between comic book Cosmo and MCU Cosmo, because they're quite different. In the MCU, Cosmo communicates via some sort of gadget. Her thoughts are essentially converted in like some, I guess, her collar, and it's repeated with a Russian accent. In the comics, Cosmo communicates via telepathy, so Cosmo beams directly into people's heads when speaking to them. Aliases is no dual. Cosmo is either known as Cosmo the Space Dog or Cosmo. Nothing else as of this recording date, anyway. Affiliations: Guardians of the Galaxy, the Nowhere Corps, and the Annihilators. So we're going to talk about each of them quite a bit. But Guardians of the Galaxy notable because of the MCU, the Nowhere Corps being the kind of crew that works on Nowhere, and the Annihilators. Cosmo's mainly affiliated with Nowhere, which they've communicated, or they've shown very well in the MCU thus far. Background: golden retriever / lab mix, and from the Soviet Union. So, Cosmo was part of the communist collective situation where they, during the space race, they're trying to, get people and animals and stuff into space first. So the Soviets put Cosmo into a ship, sends the ship out to space, and it orbits, and eventually Cosmo was never meant to return. The orbit goes out, and eventually Cosmo is hit by rays. We don't know how, why, or when. It just happens. And by the time Cosmo reaches Nowhere, she is fully powered. So, Laika, James Gunn's homage. So this is cool, and this has caused a lot of confusion. Cosmo the Space Dog in the comics is a boy, and in the MCU is a girl. I think this is probably one of the coolest changes for a character ever, because Cosmo is based off of Laika. So if you don't know who Laika is, Google it. Laika is the first animal to orbit the Earth that was sent up into space from the Soviet Union. So Cosmo is directly based off of Laika. Laika was a dog that was kind of found off the street and then trained to live in these harsh conditions and then sent up, and Laika was never meant to return, sadly. So it's actually a really kind of morbid story. But Laika's the first animal to orbit the planet, and it made it kind of she sort of paved the way for humans to be able to go up to into space. So Laika is a really big deal, and in Moscow they've erected a statue for her. But it's kind of really messed up because originally the Soviet Union communicated about Laika, and they were like, oh yeah, Laika perished because of the lack of oxygen was coming, so we euthanized her right before that happened. But what had actually happened is a few hours after, it was like the 4th orbit around the Earth, Laika died of overheating, which is really sad and really sucks. But yeah, now there's a monument and a lot of things happen, but Cosmo is based directly off of Laika, and James Gunn was like, well, Laika was a female dog, so I think Cosmo, my interpretation of Cosmo is that she's female because she's more like Laika. And I think that is one of the best changes in homage to this dog that really paved, the way for humanity. So that's a big deal. Old Russian dog. So obviously, if this was happening, the space race started in the 60s, and that is actually when Cosmo is sent to space. So this is a very old dog. So Cosmo, part of the radiation or whatever, the cosmic rays, it's assumed that, and not assumed, Cosmo is obviously very old for a dog, but so Cosmo does not age like other dogs. So, but besides that and the powers, Cosmo is a dog. So Cosmo has a bunch of, do I have that on here? Weaknesses, yes. So Cosmo has a bunch of, Cosmo's only as strong as a dog is, minus Cosmo's power. So Cosmo is an extremely strong telepath, extremely strong telekinetic. Also, Cosmo's eyes glow when he/she uses her powers. But the weaknesses are typically different types of poisons, and poisons for dogs are different than poisons for humans. So you can take Cosmo out by simply giving Cosmo chocolate and things like that. Cosmo also, outside of, as the chief of security for Nowhere, is involved in a lot of fighting and things like that. But outside of the fighting, is just a regular dog, so likes things like playing, being called a good boy/girl, depending on the version of Cosmo. Dog toys, chewing things up, fetch, all the above. So, relationships. So, in canon, Cosmo doesn't have any, we don't know, all we know is that the Xandarian world mind told us that Cosmo is a golden retriever lab mix, so we don't know the parent dogs. There's no relationship situations. It's just Cosmo's just a lonely dog in space. I know. So relationships. Cosmo makes a lot of friends. Most notably, especially that I'm going to talk about today, are friends with Nova, Richard Rider, and Star-Lord. Namely, just by association with Guardians of the Galaxy and Nowhere itself. Notable events, The Abyss. So, with The Abyss, this is when we actually are first introduced to Cosmo in that early Nova issue. So, what this was Cosmo went out of orbit, ended up at Nowhere, and became the chief of security. And on Cosmo's collar, it's very important, there is essentially a pocket dimension. It's called a dimensional envelope. It's a chip that has been programmed by the Tesseract, and what it can do is it makes this dimensional envelope, so if there's something attacking Nowhere, Cosmo can put the entire population of Nowhere in Cosmo's collar. And then only the people outside of the collar are left to defend Nowhere. So in the story where we are first introduced to Cosmo, Nova is infected by the Phalanx. If you don't know what that is, check it out. It's a really cool story. It could probably be a really neat storyline they add to Marvel Strike Force. There's a lot of potential. It's a techno-organic virus, so it's a virus that slowly converts biological matter into different types of tech. It's a big deal, especially with the mutants in the comics. So Nova lands here. He's infected with the Phalanx. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to get somewhere that might be able to cure the Phalanx. and he stops and he's trying to more or less kind of catch his breath. And then all of a sudden he's approached by this other group of people called the Luminols, who are supposed to be protecting Nowhere. And he ends up in Nowhere, and he's trying to, he recognizes it as a space station. And then he's approached by Suspensor, who's sort of the leader of the Luminols, and immediately notices that Suspensor is kind of aggressive, and in turning around reveals to Nova that Suspensor, she is actually a zombie, and the zombie starts attacking Nova, and Nova's like, well, I'm extremely powerful and I'm not super fan of zombies, so he more or less incinerates Suspensor, pretty much kills her immediately at the perfect time that the rest of the Luminols who aren't zombies show up. So all they see is Nova absolutely decimating Suspensor. And then, so Nova gets in a fight with his entire team, and Nova's sort of tearing them apart, and throughout this process gets separated from that other team, and finds out that the entirety of Nowhere is infested by these zombies, and is like, what the heck is going on? And after his fight with the Luminols, he's very weak, he's trying to recover, and he kind of crawls away, and he's kind of hiding, and then all of a sudden in the distance, you see this black silhouette of this beautiful, strong dog approaching him, wearing a Cosmonaut outfit for some reason, and all of a sudden the dog starts talking to him in his head. He's like, yo, I'm Cosmo, I'm here to help. Here's what's going on. There is these zombies, and they've been created by this magic monster that we keep at a prison on board, and if we put the monster, who is unkillable, back into his prison, we can save everybody. Also, I've got an entire population of people in my collar, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. And so Nova's like, what the hell's going on? You're a dog. And he's like, hey, by the way, Nowhere is the inside of a giant celestial head. And Nova is like, what? That's crazy. And for anyone who doesn't know, cool little fun fact about Nowhere, it is a head of a celestial cut off by Null. So in Marvel Strike Force, we always talk about Null to be a big bad eventually, whatever. Nowhere is actually a product of Null. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, so they start going through, and they end up getting in this situation where they're fighting multiple zombies and things like that. And this is where we find out that not only can the dog use telepathy, but also this dog is a very strong telekinetic and is pretty much, as in the picture shown, pretty much just decimating all these monsters all around, which is super crazy. So they end up finding the Abyss, and Nova tries to fight it, and Nova's kind of getting his butt kicked because the Abyss is this really strong sorcerer thing, who's only been in the story to my knowledge, by the way. So fun fact, maybe this could come back in a later comic and be really neat, but is a very strong being that creates zombies and shoots like photon blasts and stuff. But anyway, they fight through it, and Nova's kind of getting his butt kicked, and he ends up going to the prison, and he sees that the prison has a crack in it with which the Abyss isn't necessarily corporeal. He could like kind of change his form, so he's sort of leaked out through this crack. So Nova uses his techno-organic virus and like slams his hand into it and uses the tech to repair the prison. This sounds really cool, but you can do neat things with the techno-organic virus, but eventually it just turns you into a machine, which is not good. It's all to just assimilate into one bigger being of the Phalanx. For the Star Trek fans out there, it's pretty much the Borg. Alright, so they reform it, and then Cosmo's like, thank you, Nova, you did so much for Nowhere, here's the population, boom, you can use this teleporter to go where you want to go, boom, and Nova's like, hey, you're a good dog, and he leaves him a rubber bone to chew on, and Cosmo's so excited, and there's this really cute, I should have put it on here, but there's this really cute little panel of Cosmo sitting in his little dog bed, chewing on this toy bone. I have a slight issue with this. I don't know why Richard Rider had a rubber bone just on him. That's the only thing we need to ask ourselves very quick, very, very specifically about, as far as we buy into the science of comic books, where did Richard Rider get the rubber bone? Also, where did he keep it? We need to be aware of the real questions here, people. Okay, next up is the Annihilators. So, if you check out Frosty Features Nova, I talk about the Annihilation situation where Nova and Star-Lord are presumed dead, but they're actually just stuck in the Cancerverse. In this situation, with the Annihilators, very specifically, Cosmo is working with Star-Lord. He's part of the Thanos Imperative, which is the name of that's the comic book arc that's going on. Ultimately, watch the Frosty Features Nova episode, but in very short, Star-Lord, some of the Guardians, Nova and Thanos chase an evil Captain Marvel into the Cancerverse, beat him, and then they are afraid Thanos is going to do some bad stuff, so Star-Lord and Nova stay behind to fight Thanos, and everybody else gets through but them, and everyone thinks they're dead. Okay, that's all that happens in that. In the last conversation Cosmo has with Star-Lord, Star-Lord's like, I wish the Guardians could have been something bigger. I wish that we could have had heavier hitters. I wish that's what we should have had. We need people who could annihilate people. And so, after Star-Lord's in the Cancerverse, Cosmo is like, okay, annihilate people. We need the heaviest hitters in the galaxy to become the Guardians, to make this new team. So Cosmo sets out to put together this team called the Annihilators. So a lot of these characters are only in the comics, but some of them are in Marvel Strike Force. But I wanted to bring this up because this team is the most ridiculously stacked team on the planet. So Cosmo reaches out to them as a whole. They all say no. And then Cosmo seeks them out individually to ask them to join this team. These are the people on the Annihilators team. Silver Surfer, Marvel Strike Force fanatic, used to be super, super awesome, but everybody knows he's super powerful, whatever. Gladiator, if comes to Marvel Strike Force, should be an extremely powerful being. Only Gladiator is as strong as Gladiator feels like he is. The more confident he is, the stronger he is. He's awesome. Beta Ray Bill, Thor clone, right? Super strong. And then also, for some reason, it doesn't look like I wrote it here. Oh, there we go. And Ronan the Accuser from Guardians of the Galaxy 1, also in the game. All are part of this team. So these are all super mega heavy hitters. These are all people on like cosmic levels, maybe even to the point where they can end a universe. And so they're put together, and they're still actually relatively new. I don't think they've officially disbanded, but they haven't been in anything for a little while. But so they're all together, and you know, they're super strong, whatever, and they're flying through space, and then all of a sudden this one chick enters named Icon, and she shows up, and more or less kind of think Black Widow, just a really badass person, just shows up, but not near on the power scale, and is like, hey, I'm gonna lead the Annihilators. And everybody on the Annihilators is like, the F you will. And Icon was like, you know what, I will prove that. So Icon's back here. Yeah, so we've got Beta Ray Bill, we've got all the people. Ronan, Silver Surfer's not in there. Sentry, I believe, is a part of it. Yeah, so anyway, back here we've got Icon. So Icon shows up, and she's like, y'all have a huge problem and you don't see it. And they're like, please, show me. And Icon's like, all right, I'll fight you all right now. What are you gonna do? And so all of them turn to fight her, but all of them are afraid of using their powers and destroying the ship, so Icon wipes the floor with all of them. And she's like, you all are too powerful to be on one like situation like this, so in the event that you're invaded or whatever, you're gonna get screwed. So Icon ends up becoming the leader of the Annihilators, even though Icon in and of herself is actually the weakest member, which I thought was kind of cool. And the Annihilators stick around even until we see Star-Lord kind of come back, and then since then we haven't really heard too much about them. I believe that they're probably disbanded, just like unofficially. Not really sure. Anyway, those are the notable events. Cosmo is awesome. That's all that to say, Cosmo is awesome. So, in Marvel Strike Force, Scopely doesn't really care about power level, but here at Frosty Features, we do. So the way this works, if you are a multiversal threat, you are a threat to reality, not just your reality, but all realities as everyone knows it. You can end all of the multiverse at once. If you are a universal threat, you could end your universe, perhaps hop over to another universe, and end theirs, and by and large, end multiple universes as you go. Cosmic. If you are a cosmic, you are a threat on a planetary scale. You can take out things like planetary bodies up to solar systems and small galaxies. Nuclear means you have the power equal to that of a nuclear bomb, the ability to level small cities, and maybe up to a planetary body with enough force. Super Soldier means that you are human level, plus you are at a point in which you are past the level that a human could possibly achieve. You can take out something like a brick wall and maybe level a city block with enough time. City means you are a person, but you are the highest type of person, the highest trained type of person. You are at peak human ability in every way, maybe a master of multiple martial arts, things like that. And then there's Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that is spawned by Hela in Marvel Strike Force, and due to undead Asgardian physiology, and just because his name is Greg, for the sake of argument, we are going to put Greg on the regular human power level. So if I have a trash can full of Legos and a lot of anger or whatever, I theoretically could take out Greg. So in the case of Cosmo the space dog, Cosmo has telekinesis that automatically puts you at a pretty high level of stuff depending on how much you can lift and things like that. But in Cosmo's case, very specifically, we are looking at a being that is kind of in between nuclear and cosmic, honestly. Very notably, there's a short run where Cosmo takes out an alternate universe Hulk, right? So another universe is Bruce Banner. So that automatically puts Cosmo easily into the nuclear situation, but also just the some of the other people they fight, it gets kind of crazy. So Cosmo is actually extremely powerful. I almost hesitated putting him in nuclear and thought about putting him up in cosmic, but Cosmo is a badass dog. And according to Scopely, Golden Laboratory mix, whatever, this stuff actually I don't believe is fully established in the MCU. It's just heavily implied. So what they did was they took some of the MCU stuff and some of the comic stuff and shoved it together. They took female Cosmo and gave her male Cosmo's background, so they got it twisted, right? They took what they liked from both things. They made it the blog post and they sent it out. They got it twisted. It is what it is. And that is Frosty Features Cosmo. I hope you all enjoyed it. Let me know your favorite Cosmo moments down below in the comments. Please like, share, and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. And also, as a reminder, I stream every week on Twitch on Sundays, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where we film Frosty Features live. I hope that you all had a good time with this. I hope that you all have a fantastic week. And most importantly, y'all, stay cool.